Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I am going to be recommending you some books based on horror movies. So I am quite a fan of the horror movie genre. I do not watch as many horror films as I used to do, but I do very much enjoy them. I'm a little bit more squeamish than I used to be honest, which is why I don't consume as many. The horror genre in movies gets a lot of hate as being a lesser form of movie making, but as we are in 2019 and so many horror movies have been made, I think a well done horror movie is a great thing because a lot of people are very difficult to scare nowadays. Now I wanted to bring you a spooky book recommendation video as we are coming up to Halloween. However, I realized when I was scrolling through my Goodreads that I did not actually have that many horror books to recommend you or that many books with scary aspects. However, when I was scrolling through, I did notice that there are quite a few books that I can compare to horror movies, and so this is going to be formatted as an if you like this, then you will like this video, where if you like this horror movie, you will like this book. So getting straight into it, the first movie I have is 28 Days Later. Now if you are unfamiliar with this movie, I'm not sure how well known it is outside of the UK, but this is a post-apocalyptic horror movie that takes place in the UK when a highly contagious rage-inducing virus is released, which essentially turns humans into these rage-filled animals that attack everything on sight. It is kind of like a zombie movie, apart from I don't think the people are actually dead. So based on that movie, I would like to recommend the Illuminate Files by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman, especially the first book, Illuminate. Now this is a young adult science fiction book that follows two teenagers who have just broken up when the planet that they live on is attacked. Now there are quite a few survivors from this attack and they manage to evacuate and form a very small fleet of survivors. However, as part of the attack on their home planet, a highly contagious virus was released, and as the survivors are escaping, they are in very close confines as they are on spaceships. We start to see what happens when that virus starts to spread. Now that was an element of Illuminate that I was not expecting. I had never heard anybody talk about that, and the way that I read this series is that I listen to the audiobook while reading the physical book, and I would highly recommend doing it that way because you have a full cast audiobook with sound effects and the whole shebang, and the way that the audiobook is told, it really gives it a horror aspect that I did not expect going into this book. The next movie I have for you guys is Saw, which as you guys probably know is a very popular franchise that is commonly referred to as torture porn, and the reason for that is that the storyline in itself is mildly scary. We follow groups of people who are kidnapped and put into a secure location where they are then confronted by this weird little puppet on a television screen that tells them that it is time to play a game, and if they follow along with the rules of the game they will survive, or at least one of them will survive. However, the main draw of these movies is the torture porn aspect, and that is that visually they do not shy away from anything. There is an infamous scene from Saw where a guy has to cut off his own foot. We also have rib cages being torn open, and essentially anything visually horrific is depicted in these movies. Now as for the book recommendation, the one that I have for you based on Saw is Goyo by Junji Ito. Now it's very possible that any work by Junji Ito would be comparable to the Saw movie franchise. However, Goyo is the only one that I have read, and so it is the one that we are going with. I do not currently have a copy because I have lent it out to a friend, but this is a bind up of a serialized manga that follows a young couple who are on vacation where fish appear to grow legs, and they climb out of the ocean and start to terrorize the occupants of this island. Throughout the novel we do see this kind of spread and things are evolving, and we find out why the fish have legs, and it just gets continually more horrific as the story goes along. Now the reason that I compare this to Saw is that, as you may be able to tell from the premise, it seems more of a comedy horror than an actual horror, because immediately the first thing that comes to mind when I think of that premise is something ridiculous like Sharknado. However, as I said, it does get more and more horrific as it goes along, but the scariest thing about this story is the imagery. This story is both illustrated and written by Junji Ito, and the imagery is horrific. So I would say that this manga, or any manga by Junji Ito, is not for the faint of heart, as the imagery is terrifying and will burn into your brain for a very long time. Next up we have a classic slasher, and that would be Scream. I don't feel like I need to tell you what this is about. This is a very well-known teen slasher where we follow a murderer on Halloween who is killing teenagers. Now, the book that I have to recommend for this is There's Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins. This is quite an obvious conclusion, as when this book was released it was marketed as a teen slasher. The plot of this is pretty self-explanatory. We follow a main character who is pretty new to town. Pretty shortly after this novel commences, we start to see teenagers going missing, but the way that this story is told is a way that I particularly enjoyed. We see chapters from the perspective of the killer as they are murdering people, and then the rest of the story is told from the perspective of the main character. Now, the interesting thing about the chapters that are told in the perspective of the killer is that with each chapter told in that perspective, you get to know just a little bit more about the killer as the story goes along. Now, this book definitely has its flaws. I think the killer was revealed a little bit too soon, and this book has received a lot of mixed reviews. A lot of people said that it wasn't that good. However, if you think of it in terms of being marketed as a teen slasher movie in a book, it fulfills all of those things perfectly. So pretty much, if you like slasher movies, you will like this book. Just don't expect much more from it than a slasher movie plot. Next up we have a movie that is questionably a horror. I did check, it is a horror, but it is a very different horror to the rest that I am recommending, and that is Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. Now, as you guys may know, this is a musical. It is directed by Tim Burton. It stars Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter, and in this story we follow a man who has been wronged. He has returned to the city where he once lived, and he is looking to avenge the abduction of his wife and child. Now, I absolutely love Tim Burton and I absolutely love this movie, and it is not overly horrifying. However, there is tons and tons and tons of blood in this movie as our main character becomes a barber and starts slaughtering people while he is looking for the man responsible for what happened to his wife and child. Now, the book that I have to recommend to you based on Sweeney Todd is Nevernight by J. Kristoff. Even the colour palette of this book matches the colour palette of the entire Sweeney Todd movie, which is extremely desaturated with the exception of the colour red being highly saturated. Plot-wise, in Nevernight, we follow a young girl whose father was hanged for treason and whose mother was imprisoned. Mia is then taken in by a man who prepares her for entry into a notorious group of assassins so that she can eventually gain the skills to avenge what happened to her parents. Aside from that, this is a very bloody adult fantasy series. There is a reason that the hashtag stab 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 is commonly associated with this book. This is a story of an assassin who actually kills people. It is also very morally grey, so sometimes she will be killing the right people, as in terms of people who have actually done bad things. Other times she will be killing people because she has contracts, and other times she will be killing people just because she feels like it. Aside from all the blood and the gore and the revenge plotline, you also have a lighter side to this in that this book is extremely funny and also extremely sarcastic. So like Sweeney Todd has the musical aspect, Nevernight does have this humour to kind of lift it up and make it less of a grim story. And so overall, I think that this book would be a perfect fit for fans of Sweeney Todd. And then the last movie I have is The Craft, which is a 90s cult horror film and one of my personal favourites. Now, in this one, we follow a group of outcast teenage girls who start to pursue magic for their own gain, but they do quickly start to see negative repercussions for this. It is one of the classic 90s horror films, and to this day it is still a masterpiece. Now, the book that I would recommend if you like The Craft is the book that inspired this entire video pretty much, and that is The Furies by Katie Lowe. This is an art copy, but it is The Furies. I also believe that this book is out in the US in October, and it would be a perfect Halloween read. So this book is marketed as a mystery thriller because this story starts out with the death of a girl. Now, we are reading this book from the perspective of the main character looking back on a certain time in her life. So she is recounting a time when a girl was found dead on the property of a private school. In the rest of the novel, we follow the main character recounting the events that led up to the death of this girl. So we have that mystery aspect because going into this book, we don't know who died. We have a main cast of 4 girls. We are assuming it is one of them, and we know that it isn't the main character. But aside from that, it is impossible to tell at the beginning. Now, aside from this mystery mystery thriller plot, we do have a slightly supernatural plot line because the main character starts to attend a private school at the age of 16. She doesn't really want to go there until she gets to the grounds, and she finds out that the grounds of the school was actually the site for witch hangings back in the 1600s. Now, this school has a traditional society where one of the teachers will take under their wing a very small group of girls, and they will learn about things like women in history and women in mythology. And one of the topics that they study is the Furies, which leads these girls to try and perform some rituals of their own. Now, this is a very atmospheric, dark academia story, and I think that the atmosphere and the energy in this book is just the craft but British. We also have a lot of feminist themes in here, but what I like about this book is that it does not incriminate all men. Some of the men in this book are very terrible people. Some of them are just perfectly normal men. And in this book, the men are not always in the wrong, because sometimes this group of girls go just that little bit too far. So if you are a fan of the craft and you also like dark academia stories with angry women and witchcraft, I would highly recommend this book. It is one of my favorite books of the year, and I have not seen many people reading it. So that is it for my book recommendations based on horror movies. Please let me know if you have read any of these and what you thought of them. Please also let me know if there are any books that you can recommend to me based on horror movies, whether they are the movies that I have shown you here today or others, because I do like me some spooky vibes. I don't read nearly as many spooky books as I should, but I think during the months of October and November I am going to try and make a conscious effort to read some more witchy and dark and spooky books. But that is it for today's video. Please don't forget to like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to. If you head into my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish body butter and candle website, the Instagram for that, and a 10% off discount code. That's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go and nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.